Adolf Hitler, letter in response to Chamberlain. At Gosberg, September 23, 1938. Excellency, a thorough examination of your letter, which reached me today, as well as the necessity of clearing up the situation, definitely leads me to make the following communication. For nearly 2 decades, the Germans, as well as the various other nationalities in Czechoslovakia, have been maltreated in the most unworthy manner, tortured, economically destroyed, and, above all, prevented from realizing for themselves also the right of the nations to self-determination. All attempts of the oppressed to change the lot failed in the face of the brutal will to destruction of the Czechs. The latter were in possession of the power of the state and did not hesitate to employ it ruthlessly and barbarously. England and France have never made an endeavor to alter this situation. In my speech before the Reichstag of February 22 declared that the German Reich would take the initiative in putting an end to any further oppression of these Germans. I have, in a further declaration during the Reichsparty Congress, given clear and unmistakable expression to this decision. I recognize gratefully that at last, after 20 years, the British government, represented by Your Excellency, has now decided for its part also to undertake steps to put an end to a situation which from day to day, and indeed from hour to hour, is becoming more unbearable. For formerly the behavior of the Czechoslovak government was brutal, it can only be described during recent weeks and days as madness. The victims of this madness are innumerable Germans. In a few weeks, the number of refugees who have been driven out has risen to over 120,000. This situation, as stated above, is unbearable and will now be terminated by me. Your Excellency assures me now that the principle of the transfer of the Sudan territory to the Reich has, in principle, already been accepted. I regret to have to reply to Your Excellency that, as regards this point, the theoretical recognition of principles has also been formally granted to us Germans. In the year 1918, the armistice was concluded on the basis of the 14 points of President Wilson, which in principle were recognized by all. They were, however, in practice, broken in the most shameful way. What interests me, Your Excellency, is not the recognition of the principle that this territory is to go to Germany, but solely the realization of this principle, and the realization which both puts an end in the shortest time to the suffering of the unhappy victims of the Czech tyranny, and at the same time corresponds to the dignity of a great power. I can only emphasize to Your Excellency that these Sudeten Germans are not coming back to the German Reich in virtue of the gracious or benevolent sympathy of other nations, but on the ground of their own will, based on the right of self-determination of the nations, and of the irrevocable decision of the German Reich to give effect to this will. It is, however, for a nation an unworthy demand to have this recognition made dependent on conditions which are not provided for in treaties nor are practical in view of the shortness of the time. I have, with the best intentions and in order to give the Czech nation no justifiable cause for complaint, proposed in the event of a peaceful solution as the future frontier, the nationalities frontier, which I am convinced represents a fair adjustment between the two racial groups, taking also into account the continued existence of large language islands. I am, in addition, ready to allow plebiscites to be taken in the whole territory, which will enable subsequent corrections to be made in order, so far as it is possible, to meet the real will of the peoples concerned. I have undertaken to accept these corrections in advance. I have, moreover, declared myself ready to allow this plebiscite to take place under the control either of international commissions or of a mixed German-Czech commission. I am finally ready, during the days of the plebiscite, to withdraw our troops from the most disputed frontier areas, subject to the condition that the Czechs do the same. I am, however, not prepared to allow a territory which must be considered as belonging to Germany on the ground of the will of the people and of the recognition granted even by the Czechs to be left without the protection of the Reich. There is here no international power or agreement which would have the right to take precedence over German right. The idea of being able to entrust to the Sudan Germans alone the maintenance of order is practically impossible in consequence of the obstacles put in the way of their political organization in the course of the last decade, and particularly in recent times. As much in the interest of the tortured, because defenseless population, as well as with regard to the duties and prestige of the Reich, it is impossible for us to refrain from giving immediate protection to this territory. Your Excellency assures me that it is now impossible for you to propose such a plan to your own government. May I assure you for my part that it is impossible for me to justify any other attitude to the German people. Since, for England, it is a question at most of political imponderability, whereas for Germany, it is a question of primitive right of the security of more than 3 million human beings and the national honor of a great people. I fail to understand the observation of Your Excellency that it would not be possible for the CH government to withdraw its forces so long as they were obliged to reckon with possible invasion, since precisely by means of this solution the grounds for any forcible action are to he removed. Moreover, I cannot conceal from your excellency that the great mistrust with which I am inspired leads me to believe that the acceptance of the principle of the transfer of Sudetenland Germans to the Reich by the Czech government is only given in the hope thereby to win time, so as, by one means or another, to bring about a change in contradiction to this principle. For if the proposal that these territories are to belong to Germany is sincerely accepted, there is no ground to postpone the practical resolution of this principle. Our knowledge of Czech practice in such matters over a period of long years compels me to assume the insincerity of Czech assurances so long as they are not implemented by practical proof. The German Reich is, however, determined by one means or another to terminate these attempts, which have lasted for decades, to deny by dilatory methods the legal claims of oppressed peoples. Moreover, the same attitude applies to the other nationalities in this state. They also are the victims of long oppression and violence. In their case, also, every assurance given hitherto has been broken. In their case, also, attempts have been made by dilatory dealing with their complaints or wishes to win time in order to be able to oppress them still more subsequently. These nations also, if they are to achieve their rights, will sooner or later have no alternative but to secure them for themselves. In any event, Germany, perhaps as it now appears to be the case, should find it impossible to have the clear rights of Germans in Czechoslovakia accepted by way of negotiation, is determined to exhaust the other possibilities which then alone remain open to her. Yours sincerely, Adolf Hitler.